Hola. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Justin from FreshiesMedia, and today we are going to be talking about the second video in our series of the salmon series, and that is how to cast for big salmon in a river. So we're not going to mess around. We're going to jump right into it. Here we go. So casting into the river for salmon. This time of year, it is fall here, or coming up into fall, late summer in Ontario, and the salmon begin to stage up to make their way up the rivers to spawn. So what is the staging process? The staging process is the idea of salmon moving in from the lake to make their way onto the mouth of a river or a pier into the beginnings of making their way up the river to spawn. Now, before the salmon go up the river, what tends to happen is their metabolism slowly shuts down. And what I mean by that is that the fish spend so much time, the salmon, they spend so much time on their reproduction, as in making the eggs in the females and the males getting ready to
fertilize,
that their metabolism shuts down because they focus all of their energy on their reproduction cycle. The reason a lot of people tend to cast for them on the piers or at the mouths of rivers is because their metabolism hasn't fully shut down yet. They're more likely to attack things out of aggression because they still have a lot more energy based off of when they're up the river. They're in like full spawning, full reproduction mode, so their metabolism and energy levels in general are honestly just completely gone. So that's why you see a lot of people casting off of the mouth of the river, because they're still fresh within an extent, as in they still have the energy to bite at lures, or they still have energy to eat a couple things here and there, like a little late night snack or whatever. You're more likely to catch fish casting out at the mouth of the river than you are actually in the river at the higher section or the higher points. Now, there's a lot of factors that begin with staging salmon, and the first one is going to be, when do you start casting for them? Rain is the biggest factor that I find for fish, and temperatures, especially for salmon. When the temperature is still very warm, including the water temperature, the fish can sense that, and they tend to not want to run up the river because it is just too exhausting for them. Obviously, salmon and steelhead come from a very similar family, and they prefer colder water. Now, rain will help cool down the water if it has been through a heat wave. Rain also raises the water levels, allowing fish to run up the rivers at a quicker pace because they're less likely to be slowed down by obstructions such as rapids or dams they may not be able to get past because the river is so low. So pay attention to those things. Another big thing is wind. East wind pushes, for us in particular in Ontario, east wind pushes wind that comes from across the lake, say from the Buffalo area, and it blows it inshore, basically onto land. And what that does, it actually pushes the fish in as well. In turn, lake water is colder than stagnant river water, so it tends to cool down the river a little bit more, even at the mouth as well. So that's another helping factor in the staging salmon process. So people ask me why can't I cast for salmon in a river? I mean, you can. There's no rule saying you can't, but like I said, their metabolism is shut down so much that they're so much more unlikely to eat a moving bait in the middle of a river. But you're more likely to get hookups, and you're more likely to catch fish, and they're much stronger, a little bit more fun, more aggressive when they're in that pre-stage process at the very beginnings of it. You're more likely to get more of the fight out of the fish. You're also going to get more energy levels out of the fish, and you're also, because they're in still colder water out and closer to the lake, the fish is more likely to survive once you catch them and you release them, because once you get into those warmer temperatures, salmon stand no chance. So that's another big thing. Fish safety 101, the police. Do it right or you're in trouble. But take care of those fish, man. Like, don't treat them like garbage. People say, oh, they're gonna die anyways. Like, yeah, you're gonna die one day too. But like, I'm not trying to help the process by punching you right in the friggin' jaw.
Identify yourself.
So don't. Be nice to the fish. Be a conservationist. Be a good fisherman. Take care of the fish. Okay. Now, we are going to go over the first thing that you need to know when fishing for salmon is obviously the setup. I went over this in the very first video of what you needed. If you do want full information on that, click the link to the other video there. It will give you all the information that you need for what type of rod and all that extra stuff. But just generally going over, if you did miss it, this one here that I have is a 9-foot medium moderate Fenwick Eagle with a 3000 size Shimano Stratic with 15-pound Power Pro braided line. I tied directly right to the barrel swivel of the braided line. So the way that I do it is I go from the line directly to the barrel swivel and then right to the bait that I'm using. I've never ran a leader casting in the past. I don't need to run fluorocarbon. I feel no need to do that. I don't even do that on the lake. I don't use fluorocarbon really on the lake either. That's just personal preference. You can add a leader if you like. I find it impedes the action of the bait. I want a nice, soft, supple line so that way I get maximum movement out of the bait. Plus, I don't think they're scared of biting, the line, like of biting the bait. If they want to smash it, green braid is not going to stop them. I'll tell you that for free. Minimum 8'6" in length, maximum 10'6". Look for that medium action rod in that pure casting rod with a medium to moderate action with it. A 3000 size reel minimum. You want the line capacity. You'll thank me later. Don't worry.
Okay.
Baits. When it comes to baits, there's 1,000,001. Obviously, you have many different choices. I narrow mine down to just two. Just two, because I find these are the most productive for me. As well, it keeps a lot of the confusion out of which bait's better than this, which bait's better than that. These are two tried and true salmon baits. They work. Everyone will tell you that they work. I definitely carry a variety of colors, and I'm going to get into that in a second and explain why. But just two baits. So the first bait that I use is a Rapala J13. Oh, there's another one attached. There's a broken one attached to it, but you get the idea. Rapala J13. The Rapala J13 is a staple salmon bait, especially in that color. That is a fire tiger color. That has been known as one of the best body baits for salmon. I fish in a variety of colors, and this bait dives roughly 15 feet. They cast decent. If the wind catches them, they kind of slow down, but they cast fairly decent. I like to use the 13s. They're big size, and the salmon love them. I don't know why. They like them, so I use them. The second bait that I use is you guessed it, wow, who would have thought, a spoon. Specifically, I prefer to use the Moonshine Lure spoons. It has this cool little teardrop shape, and it's 3/4 of an ounce, and it is just an absolute piss missile. You can laser this thing like far, and it's super aerodynamic. It's got a lot of weight in a small package, and they glow in the dark. I find that they glow a lot better than some of the other companies out there that make glow in the dark spoons. And they hold a glow much longer, and it's much more bright. I fish them in a few different colors. If it was up to me, if I could have a spoon that literally the entire thing just glowed, like if the entire thing could just glow like it was just a giant nuclear ball of glowingness, I would fish that, because that's all I care about in those spoons. Some guys like to fish patterns. I have patterned ones as well. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Like if they see a glowing homing beacon, I'd feel like they're just like, I'm eating that, munch, done. Now, I'm going to explain to you what colors that I use and why I use them. This is a huge secret. Get ready for this. I use the exact same colors that I use on the lake when down rigging. Shh. Don't tell anyone. It's no secret, guys. I like to keep it very simple. Greens, oranges, black, silver. Those are my go-tos. Those have been staples for a lot of people for years. Pinks. I mean, those are just staples, and those are colors that I use on the boat when I'm down rigging for them, and I fish them out in the main lake, and they work. So I just transition those colors over to what I'm using pure casting. It's not that difficult. Now, you would think that casting for salmon takes zero technique. You bomb it out and you retrieve it. That is true. The only technique that I would say that there is a little bit of minor variance is casting a spoon. So I'll go over the J13 first. When I cast a J13, I bomb it out there. Actually, this applies for both lures. This one would apply for both lures. The only thing I do different than the J13 and the spoon is that once the spoon hits the water, I pull out a little bit extra line and I let it sink. If you were to just let the spoon hit the water and you reeled it right away, if this was the water level, your spoon's only going to sit 10 feet down, tops, depending on how fast you retrieve it. So you won't get the depth that you want. Now, the reason that I do that is when I bomb out the lure, I rip out some extra and let it sink. So now when I retrieve it, if this is the water level right here, my spoon's down here, it's going to slowly travel at an incline, and you're just fishing different water columns. So the first time that I fish it out, I'll let it sink for 5 seconds. Then the next time I'll let it sink for 2 seconds. And the next time I'll let it sink for 6 seconds, so on and so forth. So that way I know that I'm fishing different depths until I find out, okay, this is maybe what's working for me, and then I try and replicate it if I catch a fish in that section. Obviously, a steady, very slow retrieve. That one is my favorite. I just like to slowly roll it and just make, the very, very tiny movements. Very tedious, but I find that it works. But I've also caught them doing many different things. So I'll retrieve and then pause, and then retrieve and then pause, and then retrieve and then pause, or I'll sweep my rod, pick up the slack. Sweep my rod, pick up the slack. So I do a couple different things. I like to think of it as if you're a bass fisherman. Do similar things that you do bass fishing. Like bomb your spoon out, retrieve and jig it up, and then retrieve and then pick up the line, and then jig it up, and then pick up the line. So it's kind of doing this little wave action. I've caught fish doing that too. It works with the spoon for sure. So try a bunch of different things. Don't do what everybody else is doing, because if you're doing what everybody else is doing and they're not catching fish, why the hell are you going to catch fish if you're doing the same thing as them? So mix it up, experiment. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box. The last section of how to cast for salmon is going to be where. There's 2 main sections that I really like to look for. One, structure. That's very vague because you don't know what's down there. You're casting from the shore. But look for areas that have some sort of a drop-off. Maybe look for a point. Salmon are still fish. They're going to relate just like other fish to an extent, but very similar. Basically an area where the fish can feel safe, where they can come up from the deep water and prepare themselves, in this case, to go up the river. They can make their way, on that flat, and then if they feel unsure, they can go right back to deep water, and it's not very far from them. So approach it very much like a bass fisherman, I guess, in a sense. If you see a cluster of fish sitting in one area, there's a reason they're there. Try and think logically of what could be there. If you see anything maybe abnormal in that area, good chance that that area could hold fish. Another way that I really like to look at, especially when fishing salmon in these fall months when it begins to rain, is the mud line. I catch a ton of fish out of the mud line. I always aim for the mud line first. When it rains and the river washes out, so all the dirt, silt, debris from the river washes out into the main lake, and it creates like a bubble to an extent, like this sort of like bubble cloud, if you want to call it that. It stops at a certain point where you can see the separation between the clean water and the dirty water. Salmon will sit just on the outside of the bubble, on the inside of the bubble, and right on the line, because once again, structure, some sort of cover. They feel safe in that cloud because they're less likely to be seen. Fun fact, that's where salmon got their name from. Sitting in the silt of that is the mud shark. Nasty. You'll know once you catch one, once you guys catch one, you'll see what I'm talking about. Aim for the separation first, the separation of the clean water to the dirty water. You can get bites there all day if you time it right. And lastly, the first deep pool in a river before it shallows up. The fish are much, much more congregated. They have less space to go anywhere, so you know they're in a certain section. And if you can time it right, where those fish have just moved into that hole, you're way more likely to catch them if they've been sitting in that hole for a day or two. Because they're fresh, they've been untouched, they haven't been bothered. Sometimes it's all about timing. The first hole that you know before it gets shallow, target there. There's a very good chance that you'll bump into some fish. So there it is, everybody. That has been the second episode of casting for big salmon in a river. Look for those things. Pay attention to the weather. Weather's key. Weather is super key, and these fish are very sensitive to that. You're going to become a weatherman before you know it when it comes to salmon steelhead fishing. Trust me. Get out there, do some fishing, do some experimenting. If you have questions, DM me on Instagram, comment on this video if you have questions. I'll be happy to help you guys out. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you found this information useful at all, feel free to share it with a friend. Feel free to give it a like, and subscribe if you'd like to see more cool fishing content. We still have the next video coming up, which is how to drift for salmon in the river. I'm going to show you guys how to drift some skeins. I'm going to show you guys how to set up your rod with your float, all that cool stuff. That's going to be happening in the next episode. Thank you guys so much. Remember, stay freshies, and I'll see you in the next video.